Why, hello and welcome to our special live stream event from Family and Children's Services, talking about our 2018 annual report. I'm John Seward, and for the next little while, I'm going to be your host for the special live cast, and it's also going to be also on the recorded version as well. And so it's going to be lots of fun. We have lots of time for you to send us your questions in the next 60 minutes or so. If you've got questions on Facebook, just start writing them down anywhere, anytime here. Or if you're watching the recorded version of this and you have a question or comment, just go to our website, familyandchildren.ca, or call us at 613-545-3227. And just tell us what you're going to have, a question, a comment, something we can help you with, and we'd be happy to help you then. So we've got lots of stuff today to talk about, which is going to be our annual report for 2018. And this year, the annual report is talking all about our strategic plan at its anniversary milestone of 5 years. We'll be talking about the plan throughout the broadcast. Now, if you want to, you can download it from our website right now and follow along at familyandchildren.ca. You can start looking at it right away as we take your questions and some of your comments. And here to talk about all the things we're talking about for the strategic plan and the annual report is Executive Director Steve Woodman and Board Chair Dan Corbett. Hi, how are you? So listen, let's get right into it. You know, we have, it's been 5 years, I can't believe it, since we actually created this strategic plan. And one of the questions that actually we had beforehand that actually people said this was, how did this come about? Why did this start? And of course, it's also tied to the fact that we amalgamated Frontenac and Kingston with Lennox and Addington. So maybe you want to start by talking about how did this strategic plan come about?
Well, you just mentioned it. I mean, in a way, because 5 years ago, while there was a new agency that was formed, that we're now known as, there were really two different organizations. Because, you know, you can say you can have an amalgamated organization, but it takes a while to bring it all together, to get people to focus and to work more effectively together. And really, the strategic plan became the driving force for that. Because having a new strategic plan meant people could not only be involved in how to develop it, but also it gave you a focus about what kind of future you really wanted. And that's where Steve, as the executive director, came in, who was quite new at the time, really.
That's true.
Led that whole initiative, and I'm sure he can talk more effectively about it than I can.
Well, I think the important thing that we did right off the beginning was we got all the staff of the two agencies together, and we really talked about our aspirations, really our dreams for the future of the organization. And coming in as the new executive director, I was enormously impressed by the commitment and the hunger that people had to really create something wonderful. So we did a lot of consultation. We actually sent a bunch of people out to look at what we thought were some of the best agencies in the province. And they went around on what we called a discovery tour. And they came back very enthused by what they saw, by the real successes that were being had by a number of the agencies around some of the things we wanted, that we were aspiring to. Mm-hmm. And when they came back, we really put that together, and we came up with a strong vision. And the vision we had was children growing up in families. So this has really galvanized us as an organization. I think at the time there was talk of what's really needing a North Star to guide us where we're going. And children growing up in families has really guided us well for the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's guided the development of most of the activities that we have done. So I was quite excited to be the new ED here, and really the two agencies did come together, and it did take a while. But we feel strongly like one agency with a clear vision and purpose, and I think the children and families are benefiting from that.
I agree with you, Steve, and I think that vision that did come about, while it's small in terms of the number of words, it was powerful in terms of the impact it had. And you're right too, because when you think about the professionals that you have, you know, our staff members here, it gave them something to coalesce around and to build that sort of larger picture about children growing up in families and really what this is all about. And so here we are now, like 5 years later, we're now starting as a board, and you as, you know, executive director and staff to look at a new strategic plan. But on the other hand, there's been a tremendous number of successes with respect to where what we have accomplished over the last 5 years. And as a a board member and as chair of a board, I mean, we are community volunteers. We're representatives of the community. There's an awful lot of things I know you're going to talk about as the executive director, but one of the things I'm really so proud about and so pleased to see is the development of a number of community partnerships that have been led by you and led by quite a number of the people in your organization. But to see this agency reach out into the communities that we have and to build those kinds of partnerships with other agencies and organizations means we're much stronger, and this whole region is much stronger as a result of that.
Now, before we go any further, maybe this would be a good time to actually explain what our vision means. Children growing up in family. We often get questions about what does that exactly mean? Maybe you can explain it.
Well, I think maybe the best way to talk about that is to talk about the 5 strategic directions that we have under our strategic plan that support our vision. And they're sequenced in a particular order for a reason. And the very first one, our strategic direction number 1, is to strengthen families to keep children in their own home. This is really about us providing good early help and connection to a lot of our collateral agencies that give support to the families to actually stay together. It's over 9 out of every 10 families that we're involved with, the children stay in their family and they never ever have to be removed. They get the type of support that they need while they're in their family. And that really is the goal of all of our engagement. It's not always possible, but we're getting better at finding ways to make that possible. The second one is in the cases where we can't leave a child with a family, that we want to find timely alternative permanent families for the children to grow up in. And this means a real exploration of kinship and those known to the family, and for Indigenous families, customary care or adoption and legal custody as options. We really, again, don't want to be raising children within the agency. We want these children to have families to grow up in.
Right.
And the third one is family-based. We really want where the children are in our care, whether that's for a short time or for a longer time, we want to make sure that they attain good outcomes. So in that strategic directions, we're talking about things like their educational outcomes and making sure that we have a good plan to support them in their educational outcomes, or transitioning to independence at 21 or 18 as they're working their way out into the world, and really trying to create stability for them within that. So these are very important aspects of us creating a good environment for the children while they're actually in the care of the society. The fourth one is about promoting and developing professional excellence. So we have really embraced the fact that there is always learning to do. And aspiring to do things better and to learn isn't saying we aren't doing things well now. It's to say that research is always taking place. There's always new knowledge available. And we are going to be an agency that is open to ongoing learning and always trying to do things better year after year as we strive to work for the families and children of our area. And the fifth one is about being accountable and efficient. And there's a number of organizations and individuals that we're accountable to. So we're accountable, obviously, to the government for the funding that they give us and the way that it is spent in an efficient way. We're accountable to the board here at the agency that really does keep an eye on how we're doing and that we're trying to attain and the outcomes that we have. And we try to measure that. So within that being accountable, we are trying to measure and give good results back as to how we're actually performing. We also don't get all of our money through the government. We do actually get a fair amount of it through fundraising for certain activities. And enhancing our fundraising capacity is something that we've been on a journey of, and I think as we'll talk to you about, we're improving and there's still room to grow there.
So those, just my own comment is from a board perspective, is because I'm not a professional within this child welfare sector. I mean, I look at it somewhat differently, but I look at it as such an important integral part of the community. And so what I've seen through the strategic directions and goals that Steve just talked about is the agency that's moved from an absolute focus around protection to an agency that's moved much more now towards prevention And it's not lessening the need for protection at all, but the focus is around prevention. So if you can put through these goals that Steve talked about, John, if you can put programs and services and systems in place that prevent the need for protection, then we become a much better organization. We've kept families together, and the core of families is all about neighborhood. It's about building community. And so that's the impact, I think, this agency has had over the last number of years, is the strategies have been put in place, and the professionals within the organization have moved much more towards a focus around prevention-based activity.
Sure.
Well, that's actually a really great summary of the 5 points of the plan and some of the details. But of course, we want your questions and we want your comments. If you're watching right now on Facebook, then just simply start typing on Facebook right below us right here and tell us what you think, or ask a question. We also have a number of questions that were actually sent to us beforehand, and we're going to be going over those in just a minute. As well, if you want to comment or question after the fact, if you're watching the recorded version, then just simply go to our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or you can go to our website, familyandchildren.ca. Ask us a question, make a comment, and we'll answer it as soon as we can. But we do have a lot of questions already. And the first question really that we get often is one thing that is not actually in the plan itself, and that is truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Now, it isn't in the plan itself, Steve, but we actually have been working on it quite a lot for 5 years. Where are we at with that?
Well, I would say really we've been working at it more in earnest in the last year or two, but truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is part of a provincial plan that's currently going on. And there has been a real recognition and an apology from the child welfare field for child welfare's substantial role in the cultural genocide of the 60s Scoop and residential schools, and the continued overrepresentation of Indigenous children in care. And so both locally and provincially, there's been apologies related to our reconciliation journey, and a real acknowledgement, and I do acknowledge the fact that even currently we have a long way to go in our reconciliation journey and in our improvement journey of how we will collectively, with Indigenous peoples, serve Indigenous people better. And we're going to do that through giving up some of our power. We're going to do that through recognizing that we aren't experts on Indigenous lives or on Indigenous culture. And we can only do that through partnership. So we're on a journey here. And I think it's an exciting journey. It's a necessary journey, and it's a long overdue journey.
Now, Dan, what do you think? Because one of the things that we are doing, in fact, is actually having a board member who is Indigenous. So where's your take on this?
Well, my take on it is what Steve was just talking about as well. I think, I look at it from, not just from an agency perspective, but from, if you think about it nationally and you think about it provincially, about where we're at and where we need to be with respect to the relationship we have with Indigenous people, I think we have a long way to go. But there's an awful lot of good talk out there. Certainly from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there was a lot of specific recommendations that came out of that. We've started to form a number of our own very specific actions that we want to put in place. But as Steve said, it's about giving up power. It's about consultation. It's about being collaborative. And it's about trying to understand where we're at with respect to that relationship. We know what the history is. We don't have to go back through that. But we can change the future. And how we do that is not through just talking about it, but specific actions. I was really pleased to see here in Kingston in June that we had brought together and invited people from the Indigenous community to come into a talking circle. And I stood up and I made the apology. And it wasn't something that, oh, let's just script this thing and see what we're going to do. I think from Steve's perspective, and I know he firmly believes this, from a personal basis as well, and my own, we want to change the relationship. We want to build a much stronger future together. But it's how we go about that, which is absolutely critical. And that's why we need to keep working with and being engaged with the Indigenous community in Frontenac, Lennox, Addington, and Kingston. We can also do things provincially, but we need to be doing things here. And the only way we're going to see that, quite frankly, is through actions. We're going to be held accountable for, not by our words, but for the actions.
Now, another question that actually comes up that's related to this one is all about actually strategic direction 4, which is excellent, something about an anti-oppressive framework, and that's got something to do with racism. And certainly children's aid societies have been talking a lot about institutional racism, not only with Indigenous people, but with African Canadians too. What is this framework? How's it going to work, Steve?
Well, really, we are coming to grips with some of our past and our present in child welfare. This is not just locally, this is provincially. And a number of months ago, there were some reports that came out, one of which was the One Vision, One Voice report. This came out of our provincial association, and it was built in conjunction with the African Canadian communities. And it really took a serious look at the overrepresentation, in this case, in particular, of Black children in the child welfare system, and gave a lot of recommendations for how we can do things differently. And really it comes down to a few things. And this is consistent really with the reconciliation journey as well. We need to understand as child welfare practitioners, and really I would say just as Canadians, that systemic oppression and systemic racism are not particularly well understood terms, but they are alive and well in Canada. This is not a south of the border issue that's been more prevalent in the press, but this is alive and well here. It's alive and well in child welfare agencies. It's alive and well in this child welfare agency, as well as the other services that are provided, other community services. And unless we can confront honestly and with an open mind the truth of systemic bias and systemic oppression, then we can't actually start to deliver a better culturally appropriate service that will be far better for the families and children. So I think as a field, and certainly here, we have really embraced the truth of that and are taking steps to change the landscape of how we deliver these services in a much better and more culturally appropriate way. In fact, in our new strategic direction that we're currently doing, we're calling it a strategic plan refresh. We have a strategic direction. We've added 2, and one is reconciliation, will now have its own strategic direction, and anti-racism, anti-oppression will also have its own strategic direction. This is to make sure that we are accountable, that the board is kept up to date in terms of the activities that we're embarking on, and that we have clear deliverables under those strategic directions that we're going to work forward. So these aren't just polite words. This is a real commitment that we're making.
And I think the other part of this, because I agree with everything you said, is that we're not alone in this. I mean, this is not something that this agency is doing on its own. And I think, I'll just give you a sort of an aside, is just last week, for instance, I had a phone call at home from Statistics Canada. They're doing a survey here with the city of Kingston, and that's what the survey was all about. It's about, but I said to them in the end, they asked me a lot of very specific questions, which I think is great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the result of those surveys will be. But I said to them at the end, you asked me a lot of questions about, do I feel, oppressed? Do I feel racist? And I said, I'm a white male. So the answer to that is I'm looking at it from my perspective, and I think we need to look at it from the other perspective. We need to look at it from the perspective of people from different cultures, of different ethnic backgrounds and what have you. And then, as Steve said, we honestly confront where we are and what we need to do.
Now, obviously we're talking about our annual report, but one question that we did get beforehand was all about how is it that we should be judged on these issues of reconciliation, but also systemic racism. In the next annual report, next year in 2019, how should people, we're obviously working on it right now, but how should people judge how we're doing and measure our success or our failure in some of these things?
Well, let me go back to a word that Steve used at the start of this, and that's one, aspiration. So I really think it's important, for instance, I'm, at the board level, and at the senior management and staff is what is the aspirations that we have? What do we believe? Okay, and then you turn that into specific measurables. Because I think, you know, you can have large words that become meaningless if you don't put actions to it. And that's my point, I think I made a little earlier, John, is that in the end, you know, the board, Steve as the executive director, the staff, we're going to be held accountable, not by the words, but by our actions. So we want to be able to put in place through the strategic plan refresh some clear focus and around those issues, but one that we know we can look back at 12 months from now or 18 months or 24 months and say, yeah, we were back there then and this is what we were, but here's what we are right now.
What do you think, Steve?
Well, I think it's also really important to ask the question, who gets to judge whether or not we are successful? And ultimately, we don't get to be the judge of whether we're successful on that. We might be able to point to certainly some metrics that we develop and see whether or not the overrepresentation of Indigenous or other racialized groups declines in our in-care population. But really the people that we have to ask, and we have to figure out the way to do this, we have to ask Indigenous people if we're doing better. So it's their opinion that matters, not ours.
Yeah.
So you know, how we're going to do that, we're still working through, and I think we need to consult with groups in terms of how we would actually get their feedback as to whether or not they see that things are improving. I would also say this isn't a one-year journey, and yes, I hope there's improvements by next year, but these journeys are long and complex and worthwhile. And so really we're not in this for the short tick box approach. This is going to be a long journey. You should be hearing back on these issues for many years to come. And again, we need to find ways for the people that are affected to actually be the ones that can come up with whether or not we're making progress.
And I think that's going to be part of the conversation over the next number of months. So it's one thing, I agree with you, it's one thing to say we've got measures or goals in place, but how do we know? And the reality, we don't know until we actually go out and find out, okay? So I'll go back to sort of a little background that I have around quality and service delivery. Service delivery is not what we say it is, but it's what the customer says it is. And improvement in this whole issue of anti-oppression, anti-racism, reconciliation is not what we say it is. It's what the various community groups, the various agencies, the various individuals say it is. And we need to have an open mind, and we need to have ways to connect with those voices in our community so we know where we're going and what we're doing are the right things.
Okay. Now, we have time for lots more questions, lots more comments. We haven't even touched parts of the strategic plan and the annual report, but there's lots more that you can do. If you're joining us right now on Facebook, and you have a question or comment, just write it down. If you're watching the recorded version, just go to our website, familyandchildren.ca. That's also the place where you can actually download our annual report and read it for yourself with a little bit more detail. Now, one of the things we were talking about earlier today when we released the strategic plan, the annual report to the media, one thing that they were really talking about was strategic direction number one, that whole idea of strengthening families and this idea of prevention. And we've got a fantastic statistic. I'll let you talk about it, but we've actually put our money where our mouth is on prevention.
That's true. In the last, well, I'll take you back 6 years to the actual amalgamation time, which predates this 5-year plan by about a year. We had 435 children in the care of the society. And currently we have 200 children in care. So the initiatives that we put in place, again, both within the agency and with our community partners, have resulted in a dramatic reduction of children in care. So children are growing up in their families much more frequently now. And I think that's something to really be celebrated.
So we're talking about the mathematics of it. I mean, like it's 50%, it's half. It's a drop of half. So we can actually put on a mathematical equation that we're keeping families together more than we've ever done before. Is that right?
It's extremely true. And I think people that actually had involvement with us pre-amalgamation and the ones that have involvement with us now, we've actually heard stories how different their experience is with us now than it was then. And again, this is a great tribute to the hard work and the vision of the staff and the community partners that they've invested in this work, and this is not easy work.
Now, maybe this is a good time to bring up some of the reasons why that was so successful. And one of them, which we talk about in the annual report, is our service model, which is signs of safety. What is that, and why is it so important?
When we did that discovery tour that I mentioned earlier, what a number of the agencies that we thought were doing great work were doing is they were using the service model signs of safety. And the signs of safety, I believe it actually came out of Australia, but it's actually a very fulsome service model that talks about real and meaningful engagement with families, and recognizing that families actually have a lot of signs of safety even when they have some signs that things aren't going well. That for the most part, they take care of their children quite well most of the time. And if you build on the strengths that they have and from those that are around them, you can actually create through their guidance, through their own expertise, through their own wisdom about their own family. You can create clear goals to improve things to the level where we no longer have to be involved and really strengthen the family. So we're excited about that service model. Again, that's a multi-year investment in learning, and it's already paying huge dividends.
Now, in strategic direction too, we've had a number of questions about this whole idea of kinship, kin families, extended families, grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and aunts helping out, and how we have actually changed our model so that we prioritize those and prioritized kin families and made them an important part of the work we do and part of our service model. What's happened in the last 5 years with kin families?
Everything. We've actually invested a lot in adding staff in the kin area to really expand beyond thinking of kin just as brothers, sisters, parents, and looking well beyond that into the entire family network in a much more comprehensive way. And we're doing this not just as an alternate placement, where sometimes it is, but also it's the network of support that people have around them. So if you can actually engage their family or their friends, their network, in a more substantive way, you can actually improve the safety of the children by having more of a wraparound, informed support network for the families. So our expansion of our kin model, again, was modeled after a number of other agencies, and it was also modeled after someone named Kevin Campbell that's done a lot of work in the area of kinship and shown really that a truly robust kinship approach is the best way that you can deliver service. It's also culturally appropriate because your kin network is also your culture network. So us doing a better cultural job, again, is predicated on us doing really good work with kin.
Okay. Now, one question that we did get just before airtime was this whole idea, we keep on talking about family-based care and not using group care. And that's something that we've been talking about. Other children's aid societies have been talking about it too. It's related to somewhat back to our vision, which is children growing up in families. But when we say family-based care and how we're trying to really make that happen, what does that mean, Steve?
Well, it means more than just kin. At times you can't find a kin in spite of really strong efforts to do so, and the child does have to come into our care. And when they do, we want to make sure that they are in a family that is taking care of them, someone that has real connections to them. So in terms of the use of group care, we believe that we've overused group care historically. And while there's some good elements about group care, and there are some times when children benefit for a short period of time to deal with some of the issues to stabilize, for the most part, group care is not a place you want a child to be raised. You want a child to be raised not by staff, no matter how good they are, no matter how wonderful the staff are that rotate through building. That's really not a model that we would aspire to. We've gone away from that model in mental health and other areas, And child welfare still is one of the places that tends to use group care. Although I must say this again, it's not just a local success. This is part of the system of child welfare in Ontario, has taken a very close look at the use of group care and the overuse of group care. So a number of years ago, there was a publication that came out called My Real Life Book, and this was about children in care. And what it really talked about was the experience of many children in group care and how they did not find it to be a nurturing environment that made them feel connected and ready to pursue relationships in life. It really is a bit of an artificial construct. So we've done what we can. We've, again, looked at agencies that have had a lot more success than us historically in this area. And we learned from them about what was effective in terms of reducing the use of group care, and we've invested in those areas. So we've again reduced the use of group care by even more than 50%. We've reduced it actually very substantially, from over 50 to under 10. So we're very proud again of the work that we're doing in this area. And we're continuing our efforts to find nurturing environments, hopefully with their own families, for these children and youth.
Okay, now, once again, if you have a question or comment, start writing it below if you're watching this live. If you're watching the recorded version, don't hesitate to go to our website, familyandchildren.ca, to have a comment or look at more information or download the annual report, which we're talking about right now. Now, I actually have a question because I know that some of my colleagues are working on a new access program. I guess it's not quite new. Maybe it's new to the people who are watching this, but an access program that's community-based.
Yes.
Now, what is that, and why is it different from the kind of traditional access program that we've had before? What's its advantages?
Well, this also came out of the Discovery Tour, and what a number of agencies that had very robust access programs that were community-based, or sometimes even in the person's home-based, was that it honored the fact that, again, most people keep their children safe most of the time. And if that's true, then why do we do all of our access at our building in our access centers in a very clinical environment, really? So to keep that connection to the family, again, our goal is reunification if the child has come into care. To keep that alive and well, you need to keep those relationships alive and well. And the families and the children have both told us that they like actually meeting out in normal environments in the community. So we have developed 6 community access partnerships where we're having people go out and actually do their visits with their children and keep those connections alive with their children out in the community. And we're receiving tremendous feedback on the evolution of our access model.
I see, this is where I was saying earlier about the big change that I see is the number of community partners and the number of community agencies that we're now working with to fulfill not only our mandate, but the larger mandate of having kids growing up in families and in a safe community and improving quality of life. You can add that on if you want to, but I really believe that to me is a large part of the focus as we go forward. And I know you've been very involved with the community roundtable.
Yes.
Here, do you want to just, I'm taking over from you
Sure.
for a second.
It's okay.
No, but I think I think if we're talking about
let's talk about community
let's
partners.
just talk about it, because I really think it's quite an important issue as we move forward, because we're not alone in this. We can't, this agency can't meet its goals if it's not working well with other agencies in the community. I know you've taken a lead role in that. Do you want to just speak about that for a second?
Yes, so we do have a Children and Youth Steering Planning Committee, Services Planning Committee, CYSPC, here in our area. And this really is a group of, I think it's now over 40 of the community services that provide services to children and youth get together, and we do planning together around improving services and to children and youth and families in our area. And the great benefit of this is that, again, it reduces the silos. I think we've been extremely effective in terms of a community. We actually have a reputation even provincially as being a community that collaborates well together. And I was so impressed when I actually initially joined the table at all these and the sub-tables that work to make things better. I feel like it's been a wonderful environment. I've had the privilege of actually being co-chair last year and this year of that table, but it's been a great learning experience for me being there. And while we've been reaching out to try to improve our partnerships, there's also been a lot of people reaching in to actually improve their partnership with us as well. So some of the great exciting things that have come to our community in the last number of years, the situation table where again, some community partners get together and try to plan together around clients that are common to a number of us. These types of things make a huge difference for those that we're serving. You know, it's funny, we were talking about this just recently at the CYSBC as well. It's not even really about the word client. It has a connotation to it. These are just people in our community that are struggling. You know, that's all they are. And we're all rallying around to try to help people through. So the approach we're taking, this collaborative approach in our communities, it's having enormous benefit. So a shout out to the CYSBC members. A lot of our success has been their success and others beyond that table.
Yes.
Now, we have a question here from Caitlin, and she says, thanks for the information. How many foster homes do you currently have? That might be a good time for us to talk about. With all the things that we've been talking about, with changes to our service model, prevention, all that kind of stuff, we still operate a foster parent system. How does that work? And what are some of the challenges of operating that? By the way, thank you, Caitlin, for that question.
Thank you. So we've really changed our foster parent model. And again, consistent with our vision and what we're trying to do, we're seeing foster care hopefully as a temporary placement. In fact, for children 2 and under, we've moved to something called a foster to adopt model. And that is for those that wish to adopt, we actually ask them to participate as a foster parent, in particular if they're adopting a young child. And if our efforts to successfully find kin or to reunify that family are not successful, we ask them then to keep that young child in their care and adopt them. So it's actually a creative way. It's an approach that we learned again through the Discovery Tour, where there's less disruption for the child. It is something that the actual family then takes on a little bit more of the risk. You know, these families that come forward wanting to adopt, to have a child in your care for a while, knowing that they may leave, is quite difficult, and we try to support people through that. Sometimes they stay and are adopted, but again, our primary goal is reunification or kin, to keep the cultural connections alive and keep them in the family. So for me, those foster to adopt parents, they're actually heroes, and they're taking a real risk, but a risk for wonderful reasons. And we continue to do a lot of adoption. Now, those foster to adopt for the 0 to 2s are complemented by a foster care system for those really from 3 to 18, till their 18th birthday. And we do have over 100 foster parents. Where we have the real need right now, though, is with teens. So with the model that we've really been pushing around permanence for children, we don't really have many children that are younger. Even the middle-aged children, a lot of times we're able to find kin for or reunify. It's as you get up into the teen groups that it becomes a little bit more tricky. So in your extended family, if we're looking at that, finding someone who's willing to step up for a 5-year-old is much easier than it is finding support for someone that's dealing with a 14-year-old. Again, a 14-year-old that's going through a traumatic time and maybe acting out. So where we really find the need, and we're always short, is in having foster parents for the group of teens. And we're in the middle, we're about to kick off a big foster parent recruitment campaign around this. We urgently need people that are willing to open their hearts and lives to teenagers and to stick with the teenagers through both the rewarding and the interesting days that these teens can bring into your life. But we really need some people to step up there for the benefit of these youth.
That's right. Now, you can actually help when you're watching at home or watching the recorded version of this. You can help us with it. Maybe not everybody wants to be a foster parent. Maybe not everybody can. But most people actually know someone who could be a foster parent for a teen that we have. So what you should do is just go to bethehelpkidsneed.ca, or call us at 613-545-3227. We have people standing by right now to talk to you about being a foster parent. All you have to do is contact us. Also, we're having a number of open houses in the next the next month or so, and more on the horizon. So there's plenty of ways to get more information, or to get some people that you know, friends or family or members of your church, and tell them about this and get them interested so that we can help the kids that we serve. Now,
sorry, on that note, I would also like to make a call out to those, again, to try to match cultures. We really would like it if we get some multicultural foster parents. So some Black foster parents, some Indigenous foster parents, and again, also looking at religions. We want people to be retained in their culture and religions. So if there are some Muslim people that are willing to step up as foster parents as well, again, we're trying to keep people within their culture and their religions as we try to do this matching. Again, hopefully for a short time where we can get them back home. But it's important for the child not to have a disrupted sense of who they are by putting them in environments that are not culturally appropriate.
Now, one of the other questions that we did get, actually from some of our service partners, is a change in legislation has happened during the course of our strategic plan, and that is something about allowing children, or allowing our agency to help kids who are older than 16. That's just relatively new. What is that, Steve?
Historically, under the old CYFSA, like that term, we could only actually take a call with respect to a protection need of a child until their 16th birthday. And if someone called with a concern about someone that was already 16, it was beyond the legislation's mandate. And what we've been advocating for in this province is to be more similar to what most provinces are doing, and that's actually allowing the support of the Children's Aid Societies for 16 and 17-year-olds. So this legislation has opened that opportunity up. It is through voluntary agreements. They're called VYSAs, V-Y-S-A, Voluntary Youth Service Agreements. And it allows us to actually work with those youth that might be in need of our services and to help them out. And this expanded mandate is making a nice difference for some 16 or 17-year-olds that certainly at that point aren't ready just to be on their own. And helping us, giving them the supports that they need as they approach adulthood.
And I think from a board perspective, we saw this as a huge benefit with respect to how do you define success in life? Because, you know, when you think about it, teenagers, I mean, at 16 and 17, if they've been living in a whole family all their life, still have issues as they try to go from high school to college, university, or look for work. So this change in legislation, I think, is a really positive move because it provides that added opportunity for children who've been in care or youth who've been in care to move forward into young adulthood and yet still have the services around the agency and know that there's a group that really does care about them. It's not that once you're 16, you're out of it, you know, anymore, but now you're part of it. And that to me is critically important, you know, as we've looked at it, you know, as well in terms of encouraging youth from that age group to carry on after high school, to go to college, to go to university, or to find apprenticeship programs, things that are going to not only give them an education, but the potential is what you're going to have is this cycle, you know, of going back and, you know, into another kind of environment that's only going to continue some of the problem issues. So I think that it sounds like a small move, but I think it's a really important and a significant move on the part of the province and the government, and also gives agencies a much better adaptability in terms of how they can work with youth on a volunteer basis, because it's their choice. But I think hopefully many of them are going to opt to stay with the agency for at least several more years anyway.
Now that's actually a really great segue to a question that Lori asked, which is, how can I help with making a donation? And I guess it's all, we do a lot of fundraising to fill in the gaps between government programs. But Dan, you have a connection with a lot of our fundraising. How is it that someone can help?
Well, I think going back to what I just talked about, I mean, First of all, I mean, the province provides most of the funding through this agency. We know that across the province as well. But to do the things that are really going to make youth and children successful, we need to have added services and added programs. And so fundraising is becoming a critical part of what we want to do to be able to meet that need. Fundraising, not only in terms of the holiday season, where families need extra in the way of clothing or toys or whatever to make the holiday season much more enjoyable. But particularly, for instance, I know one of the things, John, I felt good about, I just talked with you the other day, is the number of youth who went to camp this summer. I think there's a number of like 140 youth.
Yeah, we doubled it this year over last, yeah.
So how important is that for kids who have come from somewhat of a disadvantaged background to have exposure in the summer to youth camps, to camps at, say, Queen's University and whatever else. So that to me is what fundraising is all about. But the really critical part is, and how you want to know how you can help, the Futures Fund to me is absolutely critical for us as we move forward. And the Futures Fund really is there to provide bursaries to students who want to carry on into college and university. And while they get some support from the province, and they may get some support from other sources, everybody knows what the costs are when you go to college or university today, or you're out taking a technical program. And so the bursaries that we provide, and I think this year we had 22 students, or something like
$50,000
$50,000 total,
13 students.
13 students. I got it wrong, but 13 students.
That was the year before.
The year before. So I've seen what those bursaries mean. And the bursaries are $2,000 or they're $1,500, but I had quite a number of students come up to me at the graduation events and really give firsthand testimony and evidence about the value of those bursaries. So yes, there's a number of ways that people can help, and the money is being put to good use.
On that note, it's not just the money either. It's the fact that the youth they feel worthwhile, that someone is investing in them. Yeah. So that sense of worth, that someone's in their corner, that they're there to help, that's as valuable as the money itself.
That's
it
right.
Actually really is an investment in them and their future, really in their hope. You're investing in their hope.
And I think that's really important for people, young people, to see that, that we're investing in them, we care about them. And one of the, I guess, for me, one of the more memorable events this summer is when we had student graduation, was we had the Lieutenant Governor here. And she came here and she spent several hours meeting students. I took part in a small focus group or an advisor group that she sat in part of, and she was there as each and every one of the students received their diploma through high school or received bursaries with respect to their college and university. So, and I know that was meaningful for her, but I know it was especially meaningful for the youth and the parents and the foster parents who came to see that, So kudos to the Lieutenant Governor if you're listening, and if you're not, we'll send you a tape.
And we should also mention here, you mentioned hope, the Tree of Hope is actually starting very soon. It's our annual holiday appeal. We've been doing it for more than 100 years in one way or another. And in November and December, we're going to help about 900 kids with toys and clothes and food and all sorts of stuff. Just go to our website, familyandchildren.ca. You'll get all the information about that and other ways to make a donation as well. Now, maybe we should, now that we're getting around, we're getting up there in the time, let's talk about who made this possible. This is a big strategic plan. We've been working on it for years. It's in a huge annual report. We're a big agency. Who do we have to thank? Who do we have to say thank you to, Steve and Dan, for all the stuff that we've been doing?
You want to start?
Well, let me start with donors, for sure.
Okay.
Let me start with volunteers. And so I'm starting from an external perspective, okay? And partners. So donors, volunteers, and partners. And they were initially involved, when we were doing the original strategic plan. I know there was a lot of consultation that went on there. But when you take it internally, it's the staff and the management, and to a degree, I'll say the board as well. But it's this, to me, it's the wonderful professional group that we have here in this agency. I've had the pleasure of being a board chair, of going to a number of meetings, to meeting with staff, to seeing it in their eyes, their belief in what they're doing. So the strategic plan was a way for them to internalize and externalize their personal beliefs and then turn that into an organizational goal as well. And I think that's going to be the success as we go through, as you mentioned, the refresh time now, to work not only with the staff here within the agency, but donors, volunteers, foster parents, and you name it. So.
Well, I think that was well said. I think maybe I would add now that it's actually the families themselves and us working in a different way and working with the strengths of the families. I think there's a stigma around involvement with child welfare that is not earned. There's very few times that we experience people that you may describe as monsters or evil. Most people are just, they're hitting a difficult patch. They're struggling for some reason with the effects of poverty or trauma, or mental health issues, and it's caused a spiral in their lives, and they've hit a really bad spot. And for most of the people, they want the best for their children. These aren't people that are out to harm their children. In fact, most of the work we do is not of a physical nature. It's usually a form of neglect that comes out of the challenges that they're facing. They're actually having trouble providing a safe, nurturing environment at the moment. So us working again and seeing these people as people that are going through a struggle is really what they are. Some of these are tremendous, wonderful people, and some of the stories would warm your heart. So there shouldn't be a stigma attached to this. People struggle. Life is hard, and it can become very hard if circumstances pile up. So we're working with families. We're trying to do that in a different way, and we're trying to honor and work with their strength and with their communities. So I want to thank the families. Thank you.
Now, you mentioned a refresh. Here we are at our annual report 2018. Our strategic plan has lasted 5 years. And what exactly is going to happen next, Steve? What's the next part of our strategic plan going to look like, and how's it going to flow?
Well, really, what we're doing right now, we are in a time frame at 5 years where normally you completely redo your strategic plan. But in all of our dialogue, we've really come to the sense that our current vision and strategic plan is still providing a clear direction for the agency. Now, there were a couple of gaps in that. We needed to really elevate our work on reconciliation and anti-oppression, anti-racism. But for the most part, this plan was already and continues to be quite effective at guiding the actions and really the identity of the agency. So we're doing a refresh. And part of that refresh is we're going to focus a little bit more this time in terms of the values and the statements of who we want to be and how we want to act. So we're in the middle of that process right now, and we're hoping that the new strategic plan will take most of the great things of the existing strategic plan and then build out some of the other elements for it.
And Dan, what do you think? What are you looking for in this refresh?
Well, I think what I'm looking for is just what Steve said. I don't think there's a need to go back and start all over, quite honestly. I think when you go back and look at the mission, the vision of the agency, you look at some of the key goals that are already or directions that have been identified there. It's building on that. So strengthening families, that's going to be a continuing part. But we may start to do things differently because there's already been some success in certain areas. So you start to think about it as an evolutionary piece as opposed to starting all over again. And I think that was the value of the current strategic plan that we put in place. And I think as you go through your process over the next couple of months and then come to the board in January, I think we're going to have a wonderful document that will guide the future. And that's really what strategic planning is about. I mean, it's just about what is our aspiration for the future and then putting it in a form that allows us to make that happen.
Now, in the short amount of time we have left, I'm going to throw you guys a curveball because this is our 124th year of service to this community. In 2019, August the 1st, it's going to be 125. So I'm wondering if you could say, when we get to 125, what's your wish for this agency? After this long history, what do you think, what is the thing that you are hoping for by the time we get to 125 and beyond? Steve, why don't you start us off?
Engagement. And I think it begins and it ends with real engagement. Engagement with the families we're serving, engagement with the Indigenous communities, engagement with our foster parents and others, with our other community agencies. If we can continue to grow this engagement, I think we're going to have a lot less than 200 kids in care, and we're going to continue down the road of our vision. And I believe it's possible. In fact, I believe it's going to happen.
And Dan, what about you?
I'll put the word success, because 125 is a couple of years out. So as we move forward, how do we know we're successful? And we're going to be successful by the impact we've had on youth and children in the community. We're going to be successful by the strengthening of families and the building of families that you've been working on with your staff here. We're going to be successful by the partnerships that we've created. We're going to be successful because the community will see us as being an important part of the community's success as well. So it's the reciprocal point. It's the engaging, yes, absolutely, but then the reciprocal point should be many of the agencies and communities and citizens in this region will say there's no longer the stigma. Because I think that's one of the things, I'm really pleased you mentioned that earlier. The stigma shouldn't be there. So that's how we're going to be successful, okay? By eliminating the stigma and creating the pull for people to come and want to work with us. Okay?
And for me, when we get to 125, I would like to have the ability or the knowledge, the knowing that people anywhere in our service area feel that they can help us by being a foster parent or a volunteer or making a donation to one of our campaigns or just advocating for some of the stuff that our kids and our families need. It's really not that difficult to get involved with family and children's services and make a difference. And in our 125th year, maybe we can see that come to fruition.
And I want to do a shout out to the Grandmothers Council and to the National Indigenous Planning, our People's Day Committee. So Laurel Klaus Johnson, Jolie Brandt, and others who've been integral in helping us in our first steps towards reconciliation. And we look forward to continuing to working with you and others in the Indigenous community on this important work.
Great. Okay, well, that kind of wraps up our time for the special live stream on Facebook from Family and Children's Services, talking about our 2018 annual report. I want to say thanks Steve and Dan and everyone who made this possible today. And of course, you for watching. Now remember, if you are watching the recorded version, you have a question or a comment, you want to get involved, you want to help out, just go to familyandchildren.ca. Our website, there's lots of information there. And you can also call us at 613-545-3227. More information is also available in our annual report. You can read it for yourself. It's only 10 pages. Just go online, take a look at it, download it, ask us some questions, whatever you like. Familyandchildren.ca is where you're going to find us. So thank you very much for all your support. We'll see you again on Facebook and online. Thanks very much for your time. Bye.